I want you to think about the last time you told yourself things were going to be different. Maybe it was the beginning of a new year. Maybe it was after a particularly brutal month where the numbers just didn't work no matter how many times you rearranged them. Maybe it was a quiet Tuesday night when you opened your banking app, looked at the balance, and felt that specific feeling, not panic exactly, but something heavier and more familiar than panic. The feeling of being exactly where you were 6 months ago, 12 months ago, of working hard, genuinely hard, and having almost nothing structurally different to show for it. You told yourself it was going to change. You meant it completely. And then life resumed, and the change didn't happen. And somewhere between the intention and the execution, something collapsed, and you're not entirely sure what it was or how to stop it from collapsing again. Here is what I want to say to you before anything else. The problem is almost certainly not your intention. It is not your intelligence. It is not even your discipline in the way most people use that word. The problem is that you have been trying to solve a systems problem with willpower, and willpower applied against a broken system loses every time. Not because you are weak, because that is simply not what willpower was built to do. My name is Anderson. And what I want to walk you through today is a specific daily operating system, not a mindset, not a motivation framework, not a list of habits that sound reasonable and disappear within 2 weeks. A structural sequence of decisions made once and automated that removes the requirement to choose correctly under pressure every single day. A system where staying broke requires more effort than building wealth, where the architecture itself does the work that willpower keeps failing to do. This works, not because it is sophisticated, because it removes the variable that keeps breaking everything else. Now, let me tell you why good intentions keep failing you. Before the system, I need to dismantle something that is quietly keeping you stuck. Because if you carry this belief into the rest of this video, nothing I show you will change anything. Most people believe their financial situation is primarily an income problem. If the number on the paycheck were bigger, the stress would be smaller, the savings would finally happen, the investing would finally start. They are waiting in some version of themselves for the income level that makes doing the right thing feel possible. Here is what the data shows with uncomfortable consistency. The average person receives multiple meaningful income increases over the course of their working life. Their savings rate stays almost identical throughout. Their financial anxiety does not diminish as income rises. In many households, it increases because the lifestyle expanded to absorb every additional dollar before it could do anything structural. The raise arrived, and so did the nicer apartment. The promotion came through, and so did the car upgrade. The bonus landed and disappeared into a combination of accumulated small expenses and the quiet relief of temporarily feeling ahead. Income is not the variable. The system is the variable. And here is why that matters specifically for you right now. A system does not require motivation. It does not require a good morning or a clear head or the absence of stress. It does not ask anything of you on the days when you have nothing left to give. It simply runs. It executes the decisions you made once in a calm moment without requiring you to make them correctly again under pressure, exhaustion, or the particular vulnerability of a Friday afternoon when everything feels harder than it should. Willpower is a resource. It depletes. It is least available precisely when you need it most at the end of a hard day, in the middle of a stressful month, when the emotional weight of everything makes a small purchase feel like the only relief immediately available. Building a financial life on willpower is building on sand. The system I'm about to describe is concrete. It doesn't care how you feel. Here is the decisions that happens before you wake up. Every financial life is shaped more by one recurring decision than by any other. It happens on the day income arrives, and most people make it wrong not deliberately, not carelessly, but structurally. By default, here is what the default looks like. Income arrives and sits in a checking account. Life happens around it. Expenses appear, some expected, some not, some that feel justified and some that feel regrettable the following morning. Discretionary spending fills the gaps between the planned expenses and the edge of the balance. And at the end of the month, whatever remains, if anything remains, gets treated as the savings contribution. The investment, the future, nothing remains. There is never anything left, not because people are irresponsible, because human beings expand consumption to fill available resources. This is not a character flaw. It is psychology so consistent and so well documented that every major consumer company in the world builds their revenue model around it. The money that is visible and accessible will be spent. That is not a prediction. It is a pattern that has held across every income level, every demographic, every culture that has been studied. The architecture that defeats it is almost embarrassingly simple. The moment income arrives, not at the end of the month, not when you remember, not when you feel motivated, an automatic transfer moves a fixed percentage to a separate account. Before you see it, before you mentally allocate it to anything, before it has any chance of becoming something else. 20% is the target. If that number is honest for you right now, start there. If it isn't, start with whatever is. 5%, 8%. The percentage matters far less than the automation, because automation eliminates the decision, and eliminating the decision is the only protection that doesn't eventually fail. I want to give you the number that makes this feel real rather than theoretical. A 25-year-old who automates $500 monthly into a broad market index fund and never increases that amount, never times the market, never does anything sophisticated, just automates and leaves it alone, has accumulated somewhere between $1.5 and $2 million by age 65 at historical average returns, not because they were exceptional investors, because they made one decision, removed it from their daily willpower budget entirely, and let 4 decades of compounding do what compounding does when you don't interfere with it. The daily practice is this: every time income of any kind arrives, it moves before you touch it. Not a goal, a non-negotiable structural fact of your financial life. Let me tell you the buffer that makes everything else survive. Here's the pattern I've watched destroy more genuine financial progress than any other single factor. And it happens to careful people, intentional people, people who are doing most things right and still somehow ending up back at zero every few months. They build momentum. 4 months of consistent saving, real investment contributions. The beginning of something that feels like it might actually be different this time. And then one thing happens. A car repair that couldn't wait. A medical bill that arrived without warning. An appliance that stopped working on an inconvenient Wednesday with no replacement budget allocated. And because there is no dedicated buffer, because the emergency fund was underfunded or was rated for something that felt urgent 3 months ago and never got replenished, they pull from the investment account or they put it on a credit card at 20% interest. 4 months of disciplined progress undone in 72 hours. Then they start again, and the cycle repeats. And after enough repetitions, something worse than financial stress sets in. The belief that progress isn't really possible for them specifically, that the system works for other people, that there is something about their particular circumstances that makes the standard advice inapplicable. The cycle is not a character verdict. It is an architecture problem, and it has a specific architectural solution. 10% of every dollar you earn belongs in a stability fund before it belongs anywhere else. Not an investment, not a growth vehicle. A boring, immediately accessible, high-yield savings account sitting as a permanent buffer between your financial progress and the next thing life decides to throw at it. The target is 5 to 6 months of your actual essential expenses, not what you spend in total, what you genuinely need: rent, utilities, groceries, insurance, minimum debt obligations. If that number is $2,500 monthly, your stability fund target sits between $12,500 and $15,000. Here is the rule that makes this fund work rather than simply exist. The moment you use it for anything, it gets replenished before anything else happens, before discretionary spending resumes, before the investment contribution restarts, before anything optional occurs. The fund is infrastructure. You do not allow infrastructure to remain depleted because infrastructure is what everything else is built on. A person with 5 months of expenses in a dedicated, untouched stability fund does not experience financial emergencies the way most people experience them. They experience inconveniences. A car repair is an inconvenience. A medical bill is an inconvenience. An appliance replacement is an inconvenience. None of them cascade, none of them undo months of progress, none of them become the reason the whole system collapses again. That protection, that specific, structural, boring protection, is what allows everything else to compound undisturbed. If this is connecting with you so far, take 2 seconds to hit the like button. It genuinely helps the channel, and I notice every single one. Let me tell you, that ceiling that sets you free, this is the step that requires the most honesty. Not because the math is complicated, because the math is simple, and simple math, applied to real spending, produces numbers that are uncomfortable to look at directly. 60% of your take-home income is the ceiling for essential expenses, not aspirational essentials, not the expenses that feel necessary because you have normalized them over years of gradual expansion. The real ones: rent or mortgage, utilities, groceries, transportation, insurance, minimum debt payments. That is the complete list. Everything else is a choice regardless of how long you have been making that choice, and regardless of how much it has come to feel like a requirement. Here is what 60% looks like with a specific number, so this doesn't stay abstract. If your take-home income is $5,000 monthly, your essentials ceiling is $3,000. If your rent is $1,800 and your car payment is $500, you have consumed 46% of your entire budget on 2 line items before a single grocery has been purchased, before a utility bill has been paid, before insurance has been covered. You are not building wealth on that structure. You are not building anything on that structure. You are servicing a lifestyle that has quietly outgrown the income supporting it. The 2 largest wealth destroyers in most households are housing and transportation, not subscriptions, not coffee, not the small daily purchases that financial content loves to blame because they're easy to mock and hard to defend. Housing and transportation, the 2 fixed costs that people consistently stretch to the maximum their income will technically support, because monthly payments feel manageable right up until they're not, and by the time they're not, the commitments are locked in for years. A $400 monthly car payment maintained over 10 years is $48,000 in total payments. That same $48,000 invested at 8% annual returns over the same period becomes approximately $73,000. You are not choosing between a nice car and a practical car. You are choosing between a car and an amount of money that, compounded forward another decade, becomes something closer to financial independence. The question that restructures this decision permanently: what is this fixed cost doing to my freedom number? Not what it costs per month. What does it cost per year? What does it cost in terms of the invested capital I would need to cover it forever? A $400 monthly car payment requires an additional $120,000 in your retirement portfolio to sustain at a safe withdrawal rate. You are not financing a car. You are financing a $120,000 reduction in your eventual freedom. Have you asked where the 20% actually goes? The money you automated in step 1 needs a destination. Not a savings account earning nothing, not a brokerage account where it sits as uninvested cash because you haven't decided what to do with it yet. A specific, structured, diversified foundation that does not require you to be a sophisticated investor to build effectively. Think of it as a simple ladder. You start at the bottom and build upward as your foundation grows. The base is capital preservation, high-yield savings accounts currently earning 4 to 5%, short-term government bonds. The goal here is not growth. It is protecting what you have built while earning something real on it. When you are beginning, preservation matters as much as accumulation. Money that is protected compounds. Money that is lost has to be rebuilt before it can compound at all. The middle of the ladder is broad market exposure. Index funds and ETFs that own the entire market rather than betting on individual companies. The S&P 500 has averaged approximately 10% annually over the long term through recessions, corrections, crashes, and recoveries. You are not trying to beat that. You are trying to own it consistently, automatically, across decades, without making emotional decisions during the inevitable periods when it feels like everything is falling apart. But here's the part most investment frameworks leave out entirely. The highest return investment available to most people under 40 is not in any financial market. It is in themselves. A $2,000 course that meaningfully increases your earning capacity by $20,000 annually is a 10 times return in the first year. No index fund produces that. No stock produces that reliably. Investing in skills that the market values is not a motivational platitude. It is the most mathematically efficient wealth-building mechanism available at the early stages of a career, and most people systematically underinvest in it while meticulously researching stock picks. The daily practice here is not daily at all. It is one decision, made once, automated completely, income arrives, money moves, assets are purchased every month. Without requiring you to feel motivated, to time anything, or to make a single active decision after the initial setup, you owe yourself that 10% now. This is the step that sounds least important and may matter most for whether the entire system survives. 10% of your income belongs to your present self, not your future, not your emergency fund, not your investment portfolio, you right now. For whatever genuinely brings you joy, a dinner worth having, a trip that changes your perspective, an experience that your future self will still reference years from now, I want to explain why this is not optional. Because people who are serious about building wealth tend to treat enjoyment as a reward for sufficient progress rather than a structural component of a sustainable system. And that belief is what causes otherwise functional financial systems to collapse. Financial systems built entirely on deprivation do not produce disciplined wealth builders. They produce people who sustain uncomfortable restrictions for 3 or 4 months, accumulate enough resentment that the system starts to feel like a punishment, and then abandon it in a single weekend of spending that undoes most of what the restriction built. The restriction felt like discipline from the inside. It was actually pressure building toward an inevitable release. The 10% enjoyment allocation exists so that the system feels like a life, not a sentence. When you know with certainty that a specific portion of your money is yours to spend without justification, without guilt, without the sense that you are stealing from your future, the compulsive pressure to spend outside that boundary loses most of its power. You stop compensating for artificial scarcity with impulsive purchases that don't satisfy anything meaningful. You spend less overall because you are spending with intention rather than desperation. The distinction that makes this allocation most valuable: spend it on things that will still matter to you in 10 years, not in dollar terms, in terms of what they gave you: a dinner that became a story, a trip that became a perspective, a concert that became a memory you return to. These have a return on your actual quality of life that no purchase of a depreciating object has ever matched. Spend the 10% like someone who has their financial life in order. Because with the rest of this system running, you do. Here is the actionable steps you owe yourself starting today. Today, open a separate savings account if you don't have one already. Label it Stability Fund. Transfer whatever you can into it right now, not the target amount, whatever is honest. The label matters more than the opening balance. Money with a name and a purpose behaves differently than money sitting in a general account waiting to become something else. This week, set up one automatic transfer, just one. The day your income arrives, a fixed amount moves to your investment account before you see it, not at the end of the month, the same day. Start the automation before you optimize the percentage. A small automated transfer that runs every month for 30 years beats a large manual transfer that requires motivation to execute and eventually stops happening. This month, run your actual essential expenses against the 60% ceiling using bank statements rather than estimates. The number will be uncomfortable in most households. That discomfort is not a verdict, it is information. Identify the single largest fixed cost that exceeds where it should be. That one line item is where the leverage is. Everything else is noise by comparison. This quarter, calculate your actual freedom number. Multiply your annual essential expenses by 25. Write that number somewhere visible. Let it be the context for every significant financial decision you face for the next 3 months. Not a source of shame, a compass that shows you exactly what each spending decision is costing you in terms of the future you are trying to build. This year, measure your progress by one metric only: not net worth, not investment returns, the gap between what you earn and what you need. If that gap grew this year, you moved toward freedom. If it shrank, something in the system needs adjusting. That single number tells you everything the complicated metrics obscure. I want to go back to the two people I described at the beginning. The one who opens their banking app and feels that familiar, heavy, specific feeling of being exactly where they were a year ago. And the one who ends this year meaningfully, structurally, irreversibly ahead. I told you the difference between them wasn't intelligence or income or luck. I want to be precise now about what it actually is. It is the decision to stop solving a systems problem with willpower, to stop relying on motivation that is abundant in the good moments and completely absent in the ones that matter most. To build, instead, an architecture that executes correctly regardless of how you feel, that pays your future before your present can spend it, that protects your progress before life can undo it, that keeps your lifestyle below what your income could fund so that the gap between them has somewhere to go. That architecture is not complicated. It does not require exceptional discipline once it is built. It requires one honest accounting of where you are, a handful of automated decisions made in a single calm afternoon, and the patience to leave it alone while it works. The person who ends this year ahead is not superhuman. They are not sacrificing their present for an abstract future. They are living now intentionally, specifically with a 10% allocation to genuine enjoyment while simultaneously building something that the person still opening their app with dread has not yet started. The difference between those two experiences compounds, not just financially, in how you sleep, in how you show up at work knowing you could leave if you needed to, in how you respond to unexpected expenses that used to constitute emergencies and now constitute inconveniences, in the quiet, specific confidence of someone whose financial life is structured to carry its own weight. Staying broke requires you to do nothing. It is the default. It is what happens when the system runs you instead of you running the system. Building wealth requires one afternoon of honest decisions and the discipline to leave the automation alone. That afternoon can be today. I'm Anderson. I'll see you in the next one. And if you're actually getting something out of this, consider subscribing. I make videos like this every week, and I try to make every single one worth your time.